Now I would like to introduce our first presenter. Sharon Zayac has been a Dominican sister of Springfield, Illinois since 1971. In 2001, she was the first graduate of St. Mary of the Woods College's Earth Literacy Master's Program. She is co-founder of Jubilee Farm, her congregation's 164-acre Center for Ecology and Spirituality near Springfield, Illinois. Her excellent book, Earth Spirituality in the Catholic and Dominican Traditions, was published in 2003. She is featured in Sarah McFarland Taylor's great book, Green Sisters, A Spiritual Ecology. Sharon is also the Laudato Si Action Platform promoter for her congregation. She writes, speaks, and leads retreats in and outside the US. And I know for a fact that she blew some minds and hearts most recently at Cincinnati Mound here in Wisconsin. Sharon Zayac, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to share my screen. I think, there we go. Well, thank you. I am really honored to have been asked to be part of this groundbreaking series on land justice issues. And that is not really a pun. The term groundbreaking holds a wealth of meaning that speaks to what this series of presentations offer. And it also does as well to remember that the word justice means right relationship, which is at the core of what I will share today. As Eric said, I am a Dominican sister from Springfield, Illinois, and I'm speaking to you today from Jubilee Farm, which lies in the portion of land that has only recently been given the name Central Illinois, but was far longer home to the Cahokia, Kaskaskia, Mishigamia, Tamaroa, Kickapoo, Peoria, and some 6 other nations who made up the Illini peoples. Again, we speak about relationships. Others in this series have and will speak to you regarding the specifics of land use and of real estate, which is a rather odd term when you think about it, and of the practical possibilities regarding taking a prophetic stance for our congregational lands. What I offer you is the why, a contextual spirituality, a sense of the sacred interconnectedness of the whole that will lay the foundation for understanding who we are in relationship to the whole, and in particular, to the lands we hold in trust. And note, I do not use the word property, and I will return to that later. There are volumes that can be said and worlds of experiences that can be shared when we speak of spirituality. For our particular focus, I can say in a nutshell that when we speak of a spirituality of land, of earth, we speak of our greater selves. And I call on 2 sources of wisdom, one contingent upon the other, to open that up. First, one source of wisdom. We take a look at our faith, at where church has been and is moving. There is a long-standing history, a rich tradition in the church regarding our intimate relationship with creation. The belief that we are part of the community of life on this earth was once as natural to us as our belief that God resides on this earth with us. The early church mothers and fathers certainly lived out of that worldview. Basil the Great in the 4th century, Augustine, and others spoke to our kinship with all creatures and of their integral role in creation. In the 5th century, Benedict created a monastic way of life, supporting his vision of our interdependent relationship to the land and the stability that relationship infers. Hildegard of Bingen, 12th century Benedictine mystic, playwright, musician, healer, visionary, counselor, and doctor of the church, used many mediums to speak of our relationship with creation and creator. Francis of Assisi's composing the Canticles of Creation in the 13th century was not an exercise in poetry. It was his hymn to his lived experience of understanding our relationship, our kinship with all, so radically that most of his followers could never manage it, and many actually rejected it. Dominic founded his order to preach against the heresy that divided the world into the materially evil and the spiritually good, rather than seeing it as one integrated whole. There are many others, including many of the founders of your own congregations. And that heritage of respecting, reverencing the whole of creation, not only as gift of God's goodness, but as an expression of, a manifestation of the divine, is supported the more we learn about creation from science. We know the story of the church and science taking different forks in the road, though we should be careful not to oversimplify it. But it is important to note that that spirit allowed science to delve into the mysteries of the world with its claim of objectivity, and to eventually come full circle in our time to the empirical reality of the total interrelatedness of the entire cosmos, and understanding that many, especially indigenous peoples, have never lost sight of. Modern science is reawakening to the oneness, the intricate balance of all that and of all that which supports it, began to spill over into other academic disciplines, into the church, and into our own imaginations. 1970 witnessed the first global celebration of Earth Day. It did not take long for bishops in the US and around the world to begin to speak to the close relationship of the poor to the land and the need for healthy water and ecosystems. Far too many to mention, but I hold up this one from the bishops of Guatemala in 1988. The cry for land, undoubtedly the strongest, most desperate cry heard in Guatemala. It bursts from the millions of Guatemalan hearts yearning not only to possess the land, but to be possessed by, and recent popes as well. John Paul II in a number of writings, but especially in 1990, in Peace with God the Creator, Peace with All Creation. Benedict XVI, a compilation of his teachings on creation and environmental responsibility, can be found in 10 Commandments for the Environment. And in 2010, his If We Want to Cultivate Peace, Protect Creation. And by the way, the Vatican added pollution and environmental devastation to its list of mortal social sins, acknowledging they are deadly in every sense of the word. Then, in that same year, this telling statement from Cardinal Peter Turkson. Hitherto, it's been common to refer to our sense of stewardship of creation. That has been the religious, theological way of presenting it. It is no longer stewardship. Now it is solidarity. That's a massive leap in understanding. And now there is Pope Francis, whose worldview, whose lens for church is integral ecology, which is reflected in almost everything he writes and speaks. Laudato Si', written already 7 years ago, has become a focus for many in the world and is utilized by many faith traditions, particularly as the church takes on the massive challenge of implementing the Laudato Si' Action Platform, a global initiative for us to achieve sustainability within the next 7 years. Engaging in the work of this platform is essential. Spirituality without action is meaningless. So, first, we had a brief look at a Catholic spirituality that supports our relationship to the whole and the necessity of action to enliven that spirituality. Our second source of wisdom actually predates church. It was not a faith tradition or religion or a theological dialogue that gave our species its core conviction that we are in an intimate relationship with the whole of creation, and that we are to live responsibly as members of the greater community of life. That understanding evolved in our ancient ancestors as they observed the world around them, as they lived in their respective homelands and witnessed how life interacted, how every created had a specific purpose or role. And from these observations, they determined what their purpose, their role was. They learned who they were, not in isolation from others, but as integral members of the greater Earth community. And as that understanding evolved, they began to ask bigger questions. Questions like, where does the sun go at night? What keeps the stars in the heavens? Why prairie? Why salmon? Why us? What does all this mean? And to answer these great questions, they told stories, epic stories, stories of the time before all this was, stories of how it all came to be. These great stories became their creation stories, stories that bound them together as a cohesive group, that defined them as a culture, that told them how to relate and interact with one another and the rest of creation. In other words, it was their cosmology, how they saw the world, the cosmos functioning, that became the basis for their culture. And it was these stories that prompted their image of the creator of it all. Cosmology is actually the context for theology, the basis for our understanding the divine. These great creation stories are so foundational to a culture that cultures, groups of peoples, have difficult times understanding other cultures whose creation stories are different. Best example, the clash that occurred between the Europeans who came to these shores and those who already resided here. It wasn't that one culture was superior to the other or one more noble than the other. It was that each came from a differing creation story, along with the assumptions that came from their interpretations of their stories, that told them who they were in the world and how they were expected to act. And for generations untold, for the Indigenous peoples of today's world, and even subconsciously for us modern folks whose DNA retains this Indigenous knowledge, we understand that we are who we are because of our intimate relationship with the land, which supports, nurtures, and nourishes us in every way, physically, emotionally, psychically, spiritually. And hence, the serious and lasting trauma caused by colonizers who remove Native peoples from the land which defines them and gives them purpose. And I repeat that the DNA in us modern peoples still holds the trauma of our ancestors' removal from their lands. And now, thanks to science, we are learning the creation story that belongs to everyone, to every culture. And of the many things that the cosmic creation story teaches us, we now can empirically prove what we have always intuited. Relationship is the fundamental reality of the universe. Everything in the universe is intimately interrelated, interconnected. Everything is what it is because of everything else that is. And the reason for that is because everything that was, is, or ever shall be comes from that first initial birthing that created and continues to create the whole of it in one unfolding evolutionary journey. That is why we can say that we are the universe, having evolved after 13 billion years into the form of a human, now become conscious of itself. We are Earth, having evolved after 4.5 billion years into the form of a human, We are Earth's minerals, her salt water, air, her plants and animals we've consumed, now become consciously aware of herself. This is not New Age, this is science, and it places upon us a profound responsibility for the whole of us. And it is also the story of our faith, as told to us in Genesis. God took the clay of earth and fashioned all the creatures of earth. Then, when everything was in place to support the newcomers, God took the clay of earth, the Adamah, and fashioned the creature of earth, Adam. Then God blew God's breath into Adam, making Adam co-creator, the one who with God brings blessing to earth. It is our relationship with the land that gives us identity, solidity, community, purpose, and meaning. Indigenous peoples own that relationship, not the land, but their relationship with it. So what does that mean for those of us who are no longer Indigenous? Can we ever regain or truly grasp that depth of belonging to place? In her book, Braiding Sweetgrass, Robin Wall Kimmerer, plant ecologist and enrolled member of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation of the Great Lakes, writes, immigrants cannot by definition be Indigenous. Indigenous is a birthright word. No amount of time or caring substitutes for soul deep fusion with the land. But if people do not feel Indigenous, can they nevertheless enter into the deep reciprocity that renews the world? Is this something that can be learned? Who will teach them? The answer she comes to, the land itself will teach them. Are we listening? The words I found myself returning to as I prepared this talk were these: the power of the land and the legacy of community. If we religious understand anything, it is the legacy of community. Our lives are the legacy of those who came before us. Who do we invite to hold the legacy that we leave, the work we have done, the passion that is ours, the commitment to right relationship? And as we make decisions about the lands we hold in trust, as we acknowledge our long-standing relationship with these lands, we are beginning to understand the power they hold. These lands are not ours to own. They are not our property, just as they are not resources. Property is a human construct connoting ownership, granting a legal right to land on paper. But we do not own the land. No one does. Lands are part of the commons, necessary to sustain the entire community of life, those who inhabit them now and all the future generations, human and other than human, who will depend upon them. Earth is not an object. She is a subject, one with whom we are in embodied relationship. Our two sources of wisdom affirm that. The cosmology that science is revealing to us in our cosmic creation story, and our faith in a creator God who loves the whole of it. Earth's gifts of air and water and minerals and soil and beauty are not resources, a word which objectifies them. So it becomes easy to think of them as things for our sole use, available for sale to others who may or may not honor their inherent value and integrity. Kimmerer goes on to say that though we may not feel Indigenous, we can become naturalized. We can learn, she writes, to live as if this is the land that feeds you, as if these are the streams from which you drink, that build your body and fill your spirit. To become naturalized is to know that your ancestors lie in this ground. Here you will give your gifts and meet your responsibilities. Live as if your children's future matters. To take care of the land as if our lives and the lives of all our relatives depend on it, because they do. And we are coming to learn these very things. Two of the most hopeful implications of our cosmic story are the knowledge that nothing remains as it was. It is always becoming something more, something new, and that it is only out of breakdown and letting go that the new emerges. What we see emerging is the growing shift in consciousness of who we are and what choices we must make. And that what we do together can open up opportunities we never imagined possible. Isn't it so very poignant that in Apache, the root word for land is the same as the word for mind?